Now your burden's lifted, carry all away. Precious blood has washed away the stain. You're listening to a message presented at New Market Christian Church. We're located at 300 South 3rd Street in New Market, Indiana. We meet for Sunday school at 9 o'clock and for worship at 10 o'clock each Sunday morning. If you do not have a church home, we'd love to invite you to join us here at New Market Christian Church. And now, a message by Dr. Gary Snowden. This week you were to have read Story, chapter 4. How many of you did it? We're still doing pretty good. A lot of folks still reading with us and keeping up with that. Out of that, I selected a message that I've entitled simply this. I've entitled it, Excuses, Excuses, Excuses. You know, the information that we're covering comes from the Story, chapter 4, but if you're wanting to read from the Scripture itself in order that you combine the two of them together, it's Exodus chapters 1 through 7 and also chapters 10 through 17. So that's kind of where all this comes from. I've been preaching for over 38 years now, and I'm amazed at all the excuses I hear. Most of them, though, are plausible. I mean, they're things that we really do think. For instance, I hear, I can't teach Sunday school because I just don't know the Bible well enough. Anybody have any idea of what's the cure for that?
Read the Bible.
I don't get that one sometimes. It's like, come on, man, you've got a copy of it. But I've heard that many times. I can't teach Sunday school because I just don't know the Bible well enough. Or how about this one? I can't commit to leading Vacation Bible School because our summer sports program, they just are so demanding. I've heard that one a lot. Or how about this one? I can't be an elder because I'm not a good public speaker or teacher. That's an excuse I often hear. How about this one? I can't be a deacon because I like to camp during the summer and I just won't be there enough to really commit to it. I've heard those things before. I mean, it really comes out of people's mouth. How about this? I can't be a door greeter because I can't remember names. Man, if that's the case, I shouldn't be a preacher. I can't remember them either. So it's like, wow. How about this one? I can't prepare communion because I can't get my family up in time to get her done. And I know that's challenging if you got kids and you're trying to get them all dressed. Right now, I'm going to be thankful Dean takes care of a lot of that. And he closes up afterwards for me. And I really appreciate that. So that's something that he does. But that's something that he wouldn't mind probably having some help with sometime. So if you're interested in learning to do some of that, he'd be a good teacher in order that we have more people that could do that. How about this one? I can't teach because someone said something that made me mad and I'm not over it yet. And it's not just teaching. I can't come to that church anymore because somebody said something that made me mad and I'm not over it yet. My thought is, what? What's my thought?
Get over it.
Get over it. You guys say, you can read my mind. You're really good. That's pretty neat. How about this one? I can't serve at the table because my wife doesn't want to be left alone. I can't because, and you fill in the blank. What is it that you can't do, and what's the excuse that you use? Don't we all make excuses from time to time? Whenever it comes to making excuses, I think oftentimes it's really not a matter of the excuse being a reality, but for us it gives us a reason or a way out. It's like the old Arab guy. This old Arab guy had a friend come up and he said, I'd like to borrow your camel. I need to take a journey over here to a distant land. I wonder if I could borrow your camel and take it for a few days to make this journey. And the man looked up at him and said, can't do it. Don't have a rope. The guy thought about it for a minute. Don't have a rope? What does that have to do with it? So finally he got brave and he said, I just don't understand. Why can't you let me borrow your camel? What does a rope have to do with it? Oh, it doesn't matter. If you don't want to let somebody borrow your camel, one excuse is good as another. If you really don't want to do it, one excuse is as good as another. Excuses, excuses, excuses. I've got to admit to you, sometimes excuses make me tired. They wear me out. You can't combat them because the bottom line, all the excuses are really saying is I don't want to do it. Now, some of them are legitimate. I learned this the hard way. I came right out of college into preaching, into graduate school, to the mission field, came back, was preaching. I did that, and I kind of had this feeling that I was doing a whole lot in the kingdom. And God brought me down a notch or two, took my voice away, and I had to go work in a factory for around 5 years, making dog food. What it helped me to realize is that I was a complete idiot whenever I was a preacher before that. After 5 years of working in the factory, I discovered something. You can't just do what preachers do. If I want to change my schedule, I just change it and go do something on a different day and move things all around. And I can just do that pretty much every day except Sunday and maybe Wednesday. But for the most part, I can move my schedule around any place I want. When you work in a factory, they own you. You have to ask for time off like 6 months in advance. And you only get like 2 weeks forever before you finally get more. It's crazy. I found out that whenever people told me they only had 2 weeks vacation and they really didn't want to spend it at church camp, I found out why. Because 2 weeks isn't very long when you're trying to do something with your family. And if you give it away working over here, so I understand legitimate reasons. And I'm not saying everything that's shared is an excuse. But I do think sometimes the excuses I hear are pretty much, I don't have a rope. Which in essence is, I really don't want to. And I think God knows the difference. And I think when God knows that it's an excuse and not really an issue, I think it wears him out too. In fact, I think it not only wears God out, I kind of believe it probably makes him angry. And there's a reason for that biblically. I've got to constantly remind myself that whenever someone is saying no to kingdom work, they're not saying no to me as a preacher. Who are they ultimately saying no to? They're saying no to God. No, God, and if it's a legitimate reason, they share that. Or if it's an excuse, they share that. But they share that with God because ultimately it's not me they're saying yes or no to. It's God that they're saying yes or no to. Him and his kingdom. They're rejecting not me, but God's will for their life by making excuses. I got news for you. Excuses are not new. They've been around for a long, long time. In fact, a few weeks ago we learned about the Garden of Eden and how that right there in the very beginning, God heard excuses. Remember when man and woman had sinned there in the Garden of Eden? God said to Adam, where are you? And kind of explained that somebody must have told him something or he must have eaten of the fruit. And all at once he starts making excuses. He said, God, the woman you gave me. So he makes an excuse. God, it's your fault because you gave her to me in the first place, and it's her fault because she led me into this mess. So then it flips over to her, and she starts saying, God, it's not all my fault. It's the serpent over there. He's the one that beguiled me and tricked me into doing this. In essence, they're saying, God, this is my excuse for my failure. It's nothing new. From the very beginning, mankind has been making excuses. I'd like for you to turn to Exodus chapter 3 and hold that in readiness. We're going to look at that today. Moses doesn't want to undertake the ministry that God's giving him. God has laid it right in his lap. He doesn't really want to do it, so he starts making excuse after excuse after excuse. Now once you get there to Exodus 3, just hold it in readiness. We're going to look at it here in a little bit, but got to kind of lay the groundwork. By the time we get to Exodus chapter 3, Joseph and his family, they're already D-E-A-D, dead. They're already dead. They've already gone to be with Jesus, so to speak. The number of Israelites that are living in Egypt has grown to approximately 2 million. That's a bunch of people. A new Pharaoh has come into control in Egypt, and this new Pharaoh doesn't even have any idea who Joseph was. I mean, when a new Pharaoh would come in, they would try to wipe out all the memories of the old people that ruled before them so that everybody would just see them as the high potentate. They actually consider themselves to be gods, if you will. So it's not surprising that he didn't even know who Joseph was. In fact, this new Pharaoh was getting just a little worried about this whole Israelite nation thing in the first place. He was afraid that he really needed to find some way to stop the population explosion because these Israelites, they were multiplying like rabbits. So he came up with an idea of how to get rid of those kids. Tried to have the midwives killed first. When that didn't work, he tried to have them thrown into the Nile and drowned. His fear was that if this nation continued to grow and there was a foreign army that came in to invade and take over Egypt, they would just hop on the bandwagon with the attacker and help them in order that they could get the upper hand in Egypt and begin to rule it. Well, he's been doing all this stuff, trying to calm down the growth of the Israelites, and by now Moses has been born, and he's been saved from death in the Nile in a very unique way, put inside a basket, taken in by Pharaoh's daughter, and raised in the house of Pharaoh. Now, after he grew into a man, he saw his people. He knew he was an Israelite from background. The reason why? His sister was there, Miriam. And whenever his sister was there, and they pulled him out of the drink, out of the Nile River, she went up and said, hey, would you like me to get somebody to nurse him for you? So, guess who she got? His mama. His own mama nursed him. So he knew from the beginning kind of the background because she had a chance to teach him. And that's Amram and Jochebed, by the way, father and mother of Moses. Amram and Jochebed. They got to raise him there in their house. So he knew his background. Finally, he grew into a man, and he made his own lame attempt to free Israel and failed miserably. Remember, he saw the Egyptian mistreating some of the Israelites, and he ended up killing him and burying him in the sand. And he had to, as a result of that, he had to run for his life. He had to flee Egypt because he tried in his own might, in his own power, to take a stand to help his people. And all it got him was into a mess. He ran away from Egypt over to the land of Midian, and he was now comfortably living there at this time. Living in the land of Midian. He married a woman by the name of Zipporah, and they were in the process of raising a family. Now, it's about this time in Moses' life that God comes into his little docile bailiwick, if you will, in a really huge way. God chooses Moses to go set Israel free. He's been out there around 40 years just wandering behind sheep. Now God says, it's time. It's time, Moses. He chooses him to set Israel free. He appeared to Moses, now get this, in a burning bush in order to get his attention. And he gave him an assignment. That's where we're going to pick up the story this week as we delve into Scripture and study excuses. 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 Let's take a look there at Exodus chapter 3, beginning with verse 7, reading down through verse 11. Now you should have that, holding that in readiness. This is what it says. It says, the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of Israel, of the Israelites, has reached me, and I've seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? We find there in verse 11 Moses' first excuse. He made an excuse for not doing what God wanted him to do. Moses said in essence, God, I'm a nobody. I'm just a nobody. Who am I to bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Now the background of that, what he's really saying, he says, God, I am a runaway murderer. Think about that. Killed the Egyptian, buried him in the sand, ran for his life. God, I'm a runaway murderer. I'm the son of slaves, Amram and Jochebed. I'm their son. I've been out here following behind a bunch of sheep for a whole lot of years. Just following along behind the bleeding sheep. Surely there's got to be some kind of a mistake here. Why would you want me to go back and try to deliver your people? How could someone like me accomplish this? Who am I, God, to do this? But that's not Moses' only excuse. When we keep on reading, we find out that he had more. Look down in verses 12 to 14. It says there, and God said, I will be with you. And this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. when you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. That is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Moses' second excuse. God, I'm not even sure how to explain to the Israelites who sent me. I don't even know who to tell them sent me over here. In essence, he's saying, God, they're not going to believe it if I go tell them a burning bush sent me. They're not going to believe it if I go tell them, I was talking to a burning bush the other day. That bush said, come on down and deliver the Israelites. They're going to think I'm not eating a fruitcake. Who is it that's sending me? God makes it clear. He said, I am the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob. I am the God who has spoken in the past, and I am the God who is speaking now. I am that I am. Tell them, I am sent you. Then to just make sure that Moses doesn't miss the point that this is God talking, he demonstrates some things for him. He has him throw down a stick, and it turns into a snake right in front of his eyes. Then he has him stick his hand into his cloak and pull it out, and doggone if it's not covered with leprosy all over, just all eaten up. And then God fixes it again, making them all clean. And then he says to Moses, if that doesn't work, if that doesn't get the attention of the Israelites, then I'll tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to turn the water of the Nile into blood. Right in the middle of this miraculous demonstration, Moses says, let me try another excuse, God. Look down in chapter 4, verse 10. It says there, Moses said to the Lord, O Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. In essence, he said, Lord, I'm not a very good public speaker. I'm not going to be good at this. I'm not who you want. You need someone eloquent, and that's not me. But God cuts Moses no slack at all. He says, you know what, Moses? I am God, and I'm the one who made your mouth in the first place. Just go give it a try. And by the way, in case you have a little bit of trouble, I'm sending Aaron to help you out. And he's a really good speaker. He promised to help him speak the words, and he promised to send Aaron to be a helpmate to him. It's here that the bottom line of all of these excuses is laid out and revealed. Right here, down in verse number 13, it says, verse number 13 of Exodus chapter 4, but Moses said, O Lord, please send someone else to do it. He just lays it out there. The bottom line is this. Moses didn't want to go. Moses didn't want to do it. It says the Lord's anger burned against Moses. Why was God mad at Moses? Because he didn't want to do what God asked him to do. He was making excuse after excuse after excuse. But when it comes right down to the bottom line, Moses just wanted him to send somebody else because he didn't want to go. And God got really angry. I wonder how many times our unwillingness to do the ministry God has called us to do has caused God's anger to burn against us. Lord, I know that they need a Sunday school teacher, and I know I'm a capable school teacher, but I'm just so busy. I don't want to do that. Lord, I know they need elders, but God, I just don't want the headache. God, I know they need deacons, but then I have to be there all the time. God, I know they need greeters, but I have to be there early. I mean, excuse after excuse. I wonder how many times our excuses make him just as angry as he was when Moses made excuse after excuse after excuse. Now here's the thing. In spite of the excuses, God was persistent. He didn't give up. He had a job for Moses to do, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer. God took care of every one of Moses' perceived deficiencies, and he used Moses powerfully to lead the people of Israel out of bondage, to lead them out of Egypt and to the promised land. I guess the question I want to ask us this morning is, what kind of excuses are we throwing at God? I'm a nobody, God. You sure you got the right guy? I'm not real stable in my understanding of who you are, God. I'm just getting into this religion thing, to this relationship thing. And I'm not really sure yet. Are you sure I'm the one to sin? Because I'm new at this. Or how about this? I'm not a very good public speaker, God. I'm not a very good teacher. I don't have those kind of skills. Are you sure you want me to be a leader? I mean, I just don't have that skill set. Or how about this? I really don't want to do this, God. Can't you just send somebody else to do it? Friends, these age-old excuses, they're still used day after day after day. And I believe God's anger burns today much like it did in the days of Moses. God has called us out of the world and into his service. That's the meaning of the word church, ecclesia, called out of the world into the service of God. He told us to begin where we are and to systematically share the gospel with the world. We're giving you a chance to do that. We've asked you to take the card, tear it off the bottom, and hand it out this week. Giving you a chance to do one of those things that God called you to do. Now, you can either make an excuse. Well, I can't think of anybody to give it to. I don't ever see anybody. I'm at home. Or you can go find somebody to give it to and invite somebody to come to worship with you. The choice is yours. Are you going to make an excuse or are you going to get her done? We can cry all we want to that I'm a nobody, but God already knows who we are. And he says, I made you special. You are made in my image. We can claim that we barely know God, but the fact is he knows us. And he's going to tell us point blank, I revealed myself to you through my Son and his words. We should know him. If we don't, we need to be growing ourselves. We can say, I'm not very good at this, or we can try and get better at the things that we're not good at in order that we can accomplish his will. The fact is, we can make excuses, or we can just admit that we don't want to do it, that we need to find somebody else. Or we can choose to do it in spite of the challenges, to accomplish God's will in spite of the work involved. Can you imagine the impact on our lives if Moses hadn't followed God's call? If that had never happened, where we would be. The Israelites never going to the promised land. God not fulfilling his promise. I don't think that's what God wanted. And I think that's why he was so persistent in Moses doing what he was called to do. In spite of his reluctance, God used Moses in amazing ways. And I believe in spite of our reluctance, when we finally put our hands to the plow and move forward, God can and will use us too. And I guess the question that we need to ask ourselves this morning is, isn't it time that we quit making excuses and say, God, here I am. Use me. God, use me as a door greeter. God, use me as a significant giver. God, use me as a Sunday school teacher. God, use me as a deacon. God, use me as a youth leader. God, use me as an elder. God, use me. What is he tugging at your heart about? What is it that you're passionate about? What ministry sets your heart on fire and makes you think, man, I wish I could do more in this area? Find something you're passionate about and hop in with both feet, asking God to give you the power to get through it. Isn't it about time that each of us says, yes, Lord, yes. Use me, dear God. If you're ready to say, yes, Lord, yes, then now's the time to come. As we stand together, as we sing our song of commitment, yes, Lord, yes. You've been listening to a message presented by Dr. Gary Snowden, minister at Newmarket Christian Church. We would love to have you come join us as we seek to worship God, love one another, and reach out to our neighbors.